Welcome to my tutorial on making an infinite zoom effect. Here are some examples of what we'll be making. I'll start off with a simple prompt in DALL-E, like an astronaut lying down in a forest. I'll let that process. Here we go. I like this third one. I'll give it a save. And I'll call this frame 001 for the first frame. I'm going to open up Photoshop and I'll pop this in. And for this to work, I need to remove the DALL-E logo. So I'll just get the rectangle select tool and go edit content aware fill and just hit OK. Sorry DALL-E, but with the logo there, the colors will bleed into the next frame, which we don't want. And then I'll go select, deselect to wipe that selection. And then I'm going to merge the two layers together and I'll give that a save with Control S or File, Save. And that's going to save over the top. Now I'm going to double click on the background to make it editable. And then I'm going to shrink it down by 30%. So I go 30 in the transform controls, hit enter. So now I've got it 30% at the size it was before. And I'll go save a copy. And I'm going to call this frame 001, but underscore resize. Yep, hit OK. Now back in DALL-E, I'm going to upload that new frame. I'm going to go edit image. And I'm going to type in what I want. So astronaut lying down in a forest. And I'll make it at autumn. Maybe that might work. And in order to generate, I just need to erase a bit on the side and hit generate. And let that run. And I've got a few I can choose through. So autumn hasn't worked that well, but it has added a bit of leaves down on the ground. So I like this one, and I'll save this. Let's call it frame 002. Pop that back into Photoshop now. Same thing. So content to wear out that logo. And deselect and merge the two layers, save that over the top and make it editable and scale it to 30% and save a copy as the resized version of 002. Save that out, back into DALL-E, re-upload that, see, edit the image. And now I'm going to try futuristic. Let's take it in a different direction. So futuristic, sci-fi, cyberspace, cyberpunk. And I just need to erase a bit there. Go generate. Let that do its thing. Let's see what it comes up with. Oh, so there's a few good ones here, but I'll focus on that third one. I like the weird sci-fi stuff at the top, but I don't like the logo. So I go edit. I just erase out the logo and the text at the top and bottom. Now I want to make sure I don't erase out any of the details in the 30% box in the middle. Cool. Here we go. And let's regenerate it. Alrighty. So quite a few good ones. And let's go with this one. I'll save it out. Yep, save it as 3. Hop into Photoshop, bring it back in. And content to wear out the logo, as per usual. Merge them, save it. 30%. Save as copy, resize. Here we go. Back into DALL-E. And I repeat the same process again. This time I might go hard surface, space, tech, mech. Just chuck all the buzzwords in. It's kind of like you're trying to retcon the image, like recontextualize it into something else. You really want to take the user on a journey through these different environments. And just keep repeating the process over and over again in this feedback loop for about 20 times. And the best part is you can repeat this for however many images you want. And here we go, we've got all 20 images. As you can see, I'm just cycling through all of them. It's quite the journey. And there we go. Now let's pop into After Effects to make the whole infinite zoom effect. Start off by dragging in those 20 images. And let's get the first one and put it into a new comp. And let's rename this comp as frames 1 to 10. Now let's take frames 2 to 10 and pop them into the comp. Cool. Now we just do the same, but with frames 11. And we go frames 11 to 20. And we take 12 to 20 and pop that in at the bottom. Pop back into the first comp. And we're going to hit S to open up scale. And we can change that to 100. And let's go to 30%. And as you can see, it's now inside the previous one, fitting there perfectly. And let's parent it. So we parent it to the second one. So now, if we move the second one, it's also going to move both the second one and the first one. The first one has been parented at the scale of 30%. So set the scale of the second one to 30 and parent it to the third one. And now do the same, third one to 30, parent it to the fourth one. However, you might start to notice that there's a very hard edge. So what we tend to do is we get the rectangular mask and select that third one and just kind of mask inside the box, but not too far. Cool, and now we're using the feathered edge that DALL-E generates. Let's make that fourth one a bit bigger and zoom in on there. Here we go, we forgot to mask it, so let's do it on the second one. And you can set frame 4 back to the 30%. And, yep, make sure you mask it here. And we'll parent it. And so we added an extra step where we scale it. And we mask it. And then we parent it. So we just want to be repeating this process over and over and over again until we've done all frames. Scaling, masking, and parenting. Here we go, we've done all the frames for the first composition. Let's head over to the second composition and just repeat the same process where we scale frame 11 and we can mask it. Yep. And parent it. Scale, mask, parent, etc. Back onto the first comp. Something you might notice, as you scale it, it will grow exponentially bigger, and thus you'll get more resistance. And it'll be really quite hard, even if you're holding shift, it's quite hard to zoom in on there. That's because these numbers keep growing exponentially and get really big. Alright, let's solve this with maths. So at each frame, it shrinks to 30% of its original size. So to get the growth, we inverse it and go 1 divided by 0.3. That will give us a number like 3.3333 recurring. And given we are using percentages, we multiply it by 100. So it's 333.33. And enter that in, and you'll see it grows to the size of the next frame. Or in this case, the previous, because we're working backwards from the last. Now to calculate it for any number of frames, we need to raise that multiplier to the power of n, where n being the number of frames, and close it off with our multiplier by 100. Let's test this out. So let's try, give it 2 frames. So to the power of 2, multiply it by 100. Yep, so it becomes 1111. Enter that in, and you'll see it hops over to the next frame. Let's try the last frame. We're working with 10 frames. We want to add an extra frame to make it blend with the other composition nicely. So let's go to the power of 11. There we go. 1 divided by 0.3 to the power of 11 times 100. we get this massive number, around 56 million. Now this is why when I'm working with lots of images in my infinite zoom, I tend to split them up into sets of 10 images per composition. For instance, say we had 75 images and we plug that into the equation, we're going to have this astronomically massive number where 41 zeros are at the end. I've tried it and After Effects does not handle those giant numbers well because of floating point precision. Alright, let's take this number and pop it into After Effects. So the first frame, we're going to set it to be really zoomed in. So you're going to notice it's going to be extra zoomed in because we're calculating by 11 frames instead. Hit that scale keyframe button to put the first keyframe there. And let's set the composition duration to about 10 seconds. Let's hop over to the next composition and repeat the same. Set it to 10 seconds. Now back in the first one, we're going to go to the very end of the timeline and set it to 30%. So it should scale from very zoomed in to zoomed out. Let's play it back and you'll notice it starts off very slow and then by the end it gets extremely fast. This is because the scale is on an exponential slope. Fixing this is easy, simply select both keyframes, right click and go keyframe assistant, exponential scale. And now it should counter the exponential curve and give you a more linear experience. Let's repeat the same for the second comp. So we started off at that massive number, and then we make a keyframe, and then at the very end, we're going to put it into the zoomed out again. So we select both keyframes and go exponential scale, and then that should be linear. Let's go ahead and make a new composition. And we'll call this one layered frames. Go ahead and drag both our frame compositions in. Let's set our layered frames to be 20 seconds, so double the length. And just move them over. When you play it back, you'll notice it repeats. And we do not want that. We want it to be a seamless blend. So to do that, it's pretty easy. We just set the opacity of the first one to about 40%. And we just drag the second one back until it matches exactly the first one. There we go. That's almost a perfect match. And now don't forget to set the opacity back to 100. Cool, there we have it. We have our nice infinite zoom. Now these next parts are just for the post-edit. So let's put the layered frames into a new composition and call this one trimmed, so we can trim the top and tail of it. Something I just noticed, there's a little edge on the side, so I'm just going to hop back into my first composition and do the mask. I had forgotten to do the mask on the first frame. I'm just going to trim the work area to skip past the ultra zoomed in part at the start. And I'm just playing it back to look for any artifacts or any issues with the masking. And I'll just trim that end so we don't get any of the black space outside. Then I'll go trim comp to work area. I want a smoother experience, so I'll take my trimmed comp and pop it into another composition I'll call time remapped. I'm going to right click this layer and go time, enable time remapping. And I'm going to go keyframe assistant, easy in and easy out on the last one. And I'm going to open up my graph editor. And holding Alt, if I drag to the right of the keyframe, it'll make it bend. And holding Alt on the last one, I'll drag it to the left, and I'll make it bend and make this nice S-curve. So we'll start off slow, and then get fast in the middle, and then towards the end, it'll slow down a bit. Cool. Now finally, I'm going to add some post effects. I'm going to drag my time remapped into a new comp, call this one post edit, and let's add an adjustment layer. I like to add a bit of chromatic aberration just to make the edges bleed a bit. And let's invert it and tone it down a bit. Cool, now if you zoom in on the edges, you get a very nice subtle edge bleed. Let's add a bit of a vignette to it. To tie it together, I like to add a bit of a glow. And I'll bump that radius up. And this lets the light from the other frame kind of leak into the next frame to make that blending more seamless. Another thing I just noticed, there's a bit of a sharp edge on that frame over there, and that is because I didn't mask off the final frame in the first composition. There we go, let's render this bad boy out.